Joining me here today is Shaun Yun from the Bateman Collective Account Strategy team. How you doing today, Shaun?
Doing pretty good.
Excellent. Happy to hear it. We had someone bail on our podcast last minute, so you're officially like the 2 minutes before the podcast fill-in that was just excited, ready to take it over.
I'm always ready to go, I hope.
Yeah. What I told Shaun, though, is what we're doing here is just what he does every day. So it's, his life has prepared him for this. He was not born ready, but
Spend a lot of time being ready to be ready.
yeah. Tell us a little bit about what you've done at Bateman Collective.
Yeah, no, I've been with Bateman Collective for quite a while now, and my biggest focus has been really just taking over a lot of our clients. Brandon, when I came in, Brandon was managing all of our clients, and I came in to help kind of take some of that off of his plate and help kind of transition into more of a strategic focus and making sure that we get to the strategic needs and things like that. Brandon's really busy, so that's kind of my goal here is making sure that we take care of our clients and give them the strategy that we need. And so I've worked with probably almost all of our clients up to this point. I've touched all of our clients in some manner. So
yeah, and now you probably work directly with more clients than anybody else.
Yeah.
On the team. So. Yeah, super grateful to have you here, and I don't want to understate the impact that you have on our clients' strategy and results, and the so many of the things that you do so much better than I did when it comes to communicating with clients and making sure that we're headed for success and all of that kind of stuff. So today the topic is that it's not all about ROI, which I know is, I guess, like controversial or and the reality is it kind of is about ROI. I mean, there's some things that are more about ROI than others. But I think that this kind of relentless focus that we have sometimes on ROI can make it so that we ultimately don't profit as much as we could in our businesses. And I want to talk about some of those details and some of the misconceptions that people have and where they go wrong. Do you have any thoughts on that? Just introducing the topic, Shaun?
Yeah, no, I think it's something that's really easy to get caught up on because ultimately it is the end result. It is the end goal. But if you're so focused on the end goal, then you're going to miss the targets on the way. In fact, I enjoy going shooting a lot. And it's something that whenever I bring somebody new, I'm always teaching them, when you're looking down the sights of a gun, if you're so focused on your target, or if you're so focused on the target that you're not really paying attention where you're aiming, then you're going to miss your shot. And you need to be able to see the whole line down your whole sight and understand that from your eye to the sight to the target, you need to be able to line that up. And if you can't see the sights, you're going to miss your shot. So I think when it comes to ROI, it's extremely important, but you also need to understand what's going to get you to that ROI.
Mm-hmm. I think another point with that is that sometimes the target's not even ROI. I mean, everybody. I think if you ask most of our clients what's the target, they'd say ROI, and I think that's a valuable metric. But really, profitability is what we're shooting for, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think volume's often ignored. That you can have 100x ROI on $10 a month in advertising spend, and it's just not that exciting, right? Mm-hmm. That's not as good as a much lower return on investment, but at a significantly higher volume.
Yeah.
There's kind of that trade-off between those. One thing I guess I would clarify too is I think a lot of this episode is going to be about decision making, like how do we analyze marketing channels and make good decisions that are going to help us get the results we're looking for in the future. And with that, it's the return in the future that we actually care about more than the return in the past. Any thoughts on that, like this dynamic of how important is past ROI versus future ROI?
Yeah, no, I think past ROI is extremely important to take into consideration because it plays a heavy role and it's one of the best ways that you can use decision making to understand what the future is going to look like. But I think as everyone has learned this year, there's a lot of question marks in our future and that we've never encountered in our past. The market's in a crazy point and that we've never seen before. And if you focus too much on the past stuff, then you aren't taking into consideration what's going on and what's going to be happening in 2023. So I think there's a very, very healthy balance that you need to find in order to be able to prepare for the future without weighing too much on the past, but at the same time using it to help kind of guide those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a critical eye to kind of get an idea of what's going on. I think sometimes things are easier understood just by taking them to a completely ridiculous extreme that'll never actually happen in real life. Like one thing I was thinking about through this was, theoretically, if I were to spend $10 million on a marketing channel and I got absolutely nothing from it, that actually wouldn't matter. If we're looking at, should I spend money on that marketing channel next year or next month or whatever the case is, the way to answer that question is, what do I think it's going to produce next year or next month or whatever the case is? Or another bias that I've seen people have is they've spent a lot of money on a marketing channel and they've done that for a long time in their business and it's just not working. Or it's predicted to not work in the future. And what do you do when you've spent millions of dollars on a marketing channel and it's produced for you? And then now you're looking at, should I do that over the next amount of time? You want to look at, is it going to produce over that next amount of time or not? And I guess the answer can definitely go both directions. How do you take into account those factors? Because something that I think is really difficult that we deal with in this industry is that trends just take a really long time to notice. Like something can change right now and we might need 6 months of data to look at it and really understand that it's changed, right? So maybe 6 months in the future, we're finally realizing that it's changed and we're making reactions. But I think it's important that we're more reactive than that. But if we become too reactive, then we're making actions based on incomplete data, and it can be a little bit all over the place. What would you say is the best way to kind of control for that?
I think patience is a big one for that, where kind of like you mentioned, if we're too reactive, if we're looking at our campaigns on the daily, there's way too much flack, way too much stuff that is just completely random, has no impact on the future. But if you don't touch your campaign for a year and then you go back and look at it and try to figure out what's going on, you're also going to have no idea because you missed so many touch points where you should have been looking at things and understanding and making adjustments. So I think it's important to be patient and give it the time it needs to develop into a trend. But at the same time, you also need to be watching at a good pace. This is exactly why we visit every 30 days with all of our clients, because it's a good amount of time where we can look at things and we can start to see trends where they start to emerge and prepare for them, but also not be too reactive and impact trends that we think are happening but may not in the future, or miss trends that are happening and such. So I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you're patient while at the same time watching things in a timely manner. So it's a hard thing to figure out, because I think everyone always has a question, how often should I be adjusting things on my campaign? And it's different for every market. I mean, if we were in e-commerce or something like that, it would be much faster, where you'd see campaign results after like 6-7 days. But here in this market, where we have a much lower conversions, or a much lower amount of conversions just in total, you have to give it the right amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your analogy from before about, I know almost nothing about shooting, so I'm gonna butcher this, guaranteed. But kind of aligning yourself with the sites, with the target, makes a ton of sense, because I kind of think of that as comparing to a funnel. Like in the top of your funnel, everybody's probably seen this before. People probably measure their marketing like this. At the top of your funnel, you have ad spend, right? That's your money you spend. And then from that, you're going to get a certain number of impressions. From those impressions, you get clicks. From those, you get leads. From those, you get good leads. From those, you get appointments and contracts and deals and canceled contracts, all that kind of stuff, right? So each of these is a phase that everything has to go through, right? If you're going to have a deal, then first someone has to see your ad. Then they have to click it. Then they have to fill out a form, and then it has to actually be a good lead, and then it has to become a contract, and then it has to become a deal, right? So that's kind of how a funnel works. Every step is mandatory. But the thing that I think there's some relationships with this. Like as you get really close to the top of that funnel, we have a lot of sample size for that, which I think is really unique, right? So, for example, if we've been running a campaign and it's been running for a week, and it has 0 impressions, nobody has seen the ad, that probably tells us that something's wrong. we don't need 6 months of data to say that something's wrong with that, right? Because because we're not actually gathering data because nothing's happening, right? Because that's a really high funnel metric because we know that should be happening whatever amount of times it's happening per day, depending on the budget and the channel and all that kind of stuff. But a lot, right? Because a lot of people see the ad for how many people actually get it. If we compare this to direct mail, it's like, did you send the postcard, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't mailed the postcard, then patience doesn't fix that, right? You got to be mailing the postcard.
It's got to be working.
Correct. So, but then we take it a little bit deeper. So we could do that. We could measure that in really small increments. But nobody cares about impressions, right? I don't care how many people see my ad. I'm sure you don't care about that. What we care about is profits, ROI, all that kind of stuff. But as we get deeper and deeper into the funnel, we get closer and closer to those metrics. But two things happen. One, we get more relevant with our metrics because we care more about clicks than we do impressions, and we care about leads more than clicks, and qualified leads more than leads, et cetera. But we also have a smaller sample size for those things. And I think with the budgets that most companies are working in this industry, you can only go so deep in the funnel in a certain time period. So that's where there are like what I would call leading metrics, which would be kind of those upper funnel things. And it's not it's not like it's a binary action. Like people talk about leading and lagging metrics, like it's either leading or it's lagging, which isn't exactly true. You're leading. There's impressions are more leading than clicks, and clicks are more leading than leads. But it's slowly becoming more lagging, and then ROI is all the way at the bottom of that whole funnel as the most lagging metric that we generally have in a campaign. So basically what I'm saying is what I would argue is that the amount of time to analyze the data depends on how much data you have, and you can always analyze it on some level, but I think where people go wrong sometimes is they analyze it deep in the funnel, but when they only have run it for enough time to analyze it high up in the funnel, there's not enough sample size to go quite that deep.
Yep. No, I think that's part of the exact issue and why people jump out when they shouldn't and make decisions when they shouldn't, where there's not, you kind of like to your point, you have to go down the funnel, and sometimes we work backwards out the funnel. We look at, so-and-so got this many leads this month kind of thing. And then that came from this many clicks, that came from this many impressions, And so you have to be able to take all of that data into consideration to be able to make those decisions. And if you're looking at ROI constantly, which I know most of us do because that's our end goal, right? But if you're constantly looking at ROI, you're so far down the funnel that there's just so much or so little that impacts it that you can't make a good decision without understanding the rest of that funnel. And so I think to your point, measuring at the right point of the funnel is another huge thing that too many people are doing wrong, where they're measuring either too high or too low in the funnel. Yeah.
And to make sure that we're like so clear that there's no opportunity for anybody to misunderstand, like we care a lot about ROI, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You just need the right time to look at it, because otherwise what you get is you get extreme values, either extremely high or extremely low. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept. It's a statistical concept of regression towards the mean. It's what it basically says is, let's just say like you take a sample of like extremely tall people, right? That are like 7'4" or whatever the case is. And you estimate what's the height of their children going to be. So if you just looked at it the way that a lot of investors look at their marketing, they'd say, well, the parent was 7'4", so the kid's going to be 7'4". If we look at it the way that that statistics would argue, we would say it's an extreme value first. So what's probably going to happen is the height of that person's children are going to be somewhere between 7'4" and the actual average height of a person. And that extreme value is probably going to regress towards the mean, and we're going to end up with a more normal value. So the second value observed tends to be much more normal than the first value observed if the first value is extreme. And where this happens, it goes both ways. We have clients where the extreme value is that they have a low return over a period of time. So then they quit even though the next value is much more likely to be significantly higher. And then we have it go where we see people get way too excited about like, picture like I just started my ads. I was talking to a client the other day that had like 3 contracts in their first weekend. And so they have this like super extreme value from like not that crazy of a budget in a really hard market where it's just like awesome. Like I'm super glad that happened, but I wouldn't call that normal. And I can say with almost certainty that that the next week's going to go worse than that, right? Because we're just dealing with a small amount of time, right? So we want to like not get too excited or upset about extreme values either direction, because there's so much random variation. It's crazy. It's crazy when you're doing big deals and you do a small number of them. And when I say small, I mean like 10, 20 a month. Right? I'm not talking, which if anybody listening to this is probably like, that's a ton of deals. But what other businesses do you know that rely on 10 or 20 customers each month?
Oh, yeah. It's
like no businesses.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And I think to that same point where it's such an emotional game where you're the owner of a company, it's your baby and you want to make sure that baby's taken care of, and when things are going really well, you're excited. When things are going bad, it's all you think about. You lose sleep over it. It's extremely emotional. And I think that's honestly part of my job is helping people manage emotions. And that's kind of the way I see it, where I see what's happening with all of our clients and I understand like it's so exciting when things are going well and it sucks when things are going bad. I think everyone listening to this podcast can agree that at some point in the last few months, there's been some moments where you're losing sleep and you're just not sure what's happening. I see it with all of the clients that I work with. And I think we all need to be careful not to let our emotions get the better of us and make decisions based on how we feel. If the business isn't going well or we're not getting the leads or they're just bad quality and we don't know what to do, we don't always make great decisions in the heat of the moment. Same thing when we get, a $60,000 spread on our first lead out of PPC or something like that. Like I've seen that happen and people get so excited. And then the next month they're like, wait, where's my next $60,000 spread? Where did it go? So I think it's such a game of emotion management to that same point of making sure that during the highs, like you said, and during the lows, we're understanding that there is a median. And we need to keep that in mind and be focusing on the median rather than the spikes or like the peaks and the valleys of the moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to make this pretty tactical now, and let's just talk about like what can you actually do to practically do that. And my favorite method is something I call controlled funnel analysis, and it's I guess I'll start with an example that maybe everybody can understand here. A good example is, let's just say you're doing direct mail. And let's just say it costs you 40 cents to send a postcard and you get a 4x return on average. If postage goes way up today and now suddenly it costs 80 cents to send a postcard instead of 40 cents to send a postcard, what return on investment are we going to have on the future is the question, right? If we're making a decision of do we want to continue to do mail or do we not want to continue to do mail? Mm-hmm. And the answer in this scenario is probably a 2x return. But if we just looked at the past and we said, well, we had a 4x historically, so we're just going to have a 4x in the future, it's going to turn us wrong because it doesn't take us 6 months to measure the data that postcards now cost us 80 cents to send instead of 40 cents, right? We can know that instantly because it's just something that situationally has changed. Or if the cost of our cold callers has doubled or whatever the case is. But I think when we get into digital marketing, people are a little bit less familiar with some of those dynamics and how they function. So they don't quite know how it works. So it's not quite as cut and dry. And also that happens on a ton of different levels. So my favorite way to go about this is, like I said, controlled funnel analysis. And the way that this works is if you picture that funnel, what we can do is we can actually measure what's happening until a certain point of the funnel. And maybe where we cut that off is clicks if we have like a really small sample size. Maybe if we have more sample size, we could cut that off as leads. Or if we have more, we can go qualified leads or appointments or contracts or whatever the case is. Right? So we kind of measure as deep into the funnel as we can reasonably. And then we add in assumptions after that point. So this is kind of like the controlled part where we're assuming things. And let's just say we're working with a client that just started with us. What we might do is say, well, your cost per lead, for example, is $100. And we expect with this channel and these circumstances and everything, maybe it takes 20 leads to get to a contract. So what we're doing is we're saying we expect the $100 cost per lead. And then we're assuming it's going to take 20 of those to get to a contract because maybe we only have 10 now. Maybe we have 20, maybe we have 30. It's not a good sample size for what our actual rate of getting to a contract is. So then we assume that, and then we can realize it's probably going to be trending towards a $2,000 cost per deal. So assuming the rest. And one place where we really commonly do this is based on opportunities. Like we know in PPC, for example, it generally takes about 4.8 opportunities to get to a contract, right? So we can see like what is our cost to get an opportunity, and then we can assume the rest if we don't have much sample size for that. But the really cool thing that this does is compared to just the pure patience play, where the cost of postage could double and you wouldn't notice, we're actually seeing those things that are shifting, right? Because it means something if our cost per lead has gone way down and we have enough sample size to say that that's the case, or if our lead quality has drastically improved or something. That means something. But when these time periods are too short for us to measure the entire funnel from an ROI standpoint, we can make a few assumptions. And we can do that based on our averages, which works if someone's brand new working with us. We can also do that by some blend of that and then the company we're working with and their historical averages, if they know kind of what it's taken to get to PPC deals historically. Does that process kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think to your point of making sure that we're measuring at the right point and controlling that analysis where it should be, I think when it comes to, I think the biggest benefit that Bateman has over everyone else. Sorry, I'm gonna kind of preach
Get
a
on the
little bit.
soapbox. I want to hear it. Yeah.
No, and the thing I've been most impressed with working with you and the Bateman Collective is that we have the ability to look further down the funnel than someone does just running their own campaigns. To your point, being able to control that analysis requires so much data if you're going to do it effectively. And I've never seen an agency with the amount of data that we have been able to collect. It blows my mind how we and for everyone's understanding, we measure it at much more than just the impressions, clicks, and conversions. Like we because we have all of our clients housed under one manager and one MCC, we're able to understand what the numbers are on, how are these leads qualified or unqualified? What's our cost per qualified lead? We can get so deep in that, and it allows us to make decisions across all of our clients using all that data from everyone to control that analysis. Kind of like you're saying, where even though, let's say you just started a new campaign, and you're 2 months in, you have maybe enough impressions, barely some clicks, to be making some decisions. Your hands are tied. You just have to wait longer. And because we have the ability to look at so much more data across all of our clients across the whole country, we can look past that barrier. And it's part of the reason why I think our campaigns just do so much better than a lot of other agencies, is because we can use that data to get past that barrier. I worked in e-commerce for a while, and I didn't like e-commerce because every market is completely different, and it's impossible to gather data on one market and apply it to another, and so you can't do that in most markets. And so in this market, having that advantage is a game changer. And honestly, I think that's credits to a lot of the success we've had and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to share one story about this that I think is pretty interesting. It was this client they were working with, and they were running Facebook ads and Google ads. And basically, they came to me saying, like, I'm really concerned about Google. We're happy with Facebook, really concerned about Google. They had like a deal on Facebook. They had nothing on Google. And they just said, like, we want to cut Google. We want to double down on Facebook. When we did this funnel analysis, there were a few things that we saw. The first one was their rate of closing for the number of opportunities they had on Facebook was really high. Remember, we talked about this concept of regression towards the mean. That was a odd number. What's it called? Outlier, right? That was like the equivalent of like the 7'4" person is what we saw in terms of like their conversion on opportunities so far. Yeah. And their cost per lead was actually really high on Facebook. And on Google, on the other hand, the cost per click was super high historically, and it had gone down significantly with the market shift. And they historically just had some lead quality issues that were specific to one particular aspect of the account. So they're looking at it like, we haven't really gotten much of anything quality from Google. I'm looking at it like we're a little bit lucky on Facebook, and on Google, we can actually see that we have some sample size issues and a really clear direction to shift the campaign. So anyways, when it came down to it, they just said, get rid of Google. We're going to double down on Facebook. So I had this conversation with them. It's like, I feel like I have to say this. Like, that's a really bad idea. I'm so sorry. I don't want to like go against you, but it's a bad idea. But they did it anyways. They just said like, that's what we got to do. But 2 months later, we convinced them like, you should probably put Google back. So we do that. And then looking at their business today, Google has performed with close to a 10x return on investment over the past 4 or 5 months, compared to they had nothing before. And Facebook has actually tanked negatively. And believe it or not, the cost per qualified lead has stayed really steady, but they just haven't converted as well in those opportunities. So they have actually regressed towards the mean, so to speak, on Facebook. And on Google, we're seeing that the pattern of future results didn't look like the past. But we did that through looking at the leading metrics versus the lagging metrics, because what we could tell is, like, when we look at the data, we can see, yes, the result is this, but Facebook is lucky. Mm-hmm. And on Google, we can see, yes, the result is this, but it's a little bit unlucky. And with time, we can see some of those leading metrics are trending really well. Kind of the equivalent of, we're now seeing that it costs 10 cents to send postcards instead of 40. And we know that those funnel metrics will work out if we can keep it at that cost. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's just a story. I'm sure you've had similar circumstances with clients. I love this circumstance because we actually were able to like continue to spend the money to see how it plays out at some point. Yeah. Because there's a lot of these circumstances where our hands are tied, right? We tell the client, you should do this. By the way, if you hire a company to run your marketing and you don't listen to them, I just don't understand what you're doing. But there's a lot of circumstances where, we make our recommendations, people don't want to listen to them, and we never see how it would have played out otherwise, mm-hmm. right? You kind of like seal your own fate if you decide to stop doing something, because you never know what would have happened otherwise. Mm-hmm. But this circumstance was interesting because we were able to kind of re-engage it later and see what happened.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that occurs more often than a lot of people think. And I think, I've worked with a number of clients. I was trying to think of one specific example, but there's a lot of people just looking at things too prematurely. And to give you guys an idea, something that we measure a lot is how long clients stick around after starting campaigns and how that goes, right? And it skews. There's so much, so many people that get so nervous around the 2 to 3 month mark. And in our onboarding, we're always saying this is a 6 month process. In our sales, we say this is a 6 month process. You got to give it 6 months. Make sure you have the money for 6 months. I feel like we drag that concept just continually beating it.
Yeah, we definitely beat the dead
people,
horse,
right?
There,
But at the same time, it's so important, And I cannot tell all of you guys how often I have the conversation at like 2-3 month mark saying, I don't know about this. It's not my best ROI. I'm getting better ROI from here and things like that. And I think it's such it makes me really frustrated when people don't understand that it's something you need to be able to get to the right point to understand what kind of ROI you're going to get. No one gets 10x ROI after 2-3 months. It's impossible. And if you do, you're insanely lucky and it's not going to continue.
Yeah. I'd argue it's like, if you're talking about that good of a return, it actually happens more often in that time period than not, because we're talking about, because I think what happens at the beginning, it's not necessarily bad returns. Mm-hmm. It's you observe the most extreme values. Yeah. And those values, can be extremely good or extremely bad. It's just like we see the whole bell curve, right? So we're a little bit more like relaxed about it because we just, it's like been there, done that, seen it before. Yeah. But it's I get it when it's like it's the money you spend, it's the only money you've spent, it's your only data point, then it's a lot more concerning. So I totally hear what you're saying, but I also get where like some of our clients are coming from. And also, to be clear, like, this is like 10% of That's our clients. Like 90% of our clients just like trust us, and follow the process, and it's awesome, right? So it's just it's so hard when you want something for someone, you want it to work for them, but it's but you have to. It has to be a mutual effort from both sides in order to get where you're trying to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough game. One analogy I've heard before is it's kind of like launching a rocket into space. If you look at the beginning, it takes like 90% of the fuel that the rocket has. This especially applies to SEO.
Oh yeah.
It takes like 90% of the fuel that the rocket has just to get it like off the ground and like up a certain amount, right? And then like as you go, it gets exponentially easier to now and then eventually, you're in orbit and you just need like a little fuel to go a really long way, right? But it takes a lot to get off the ground. And everybody talks about how they were in orbit and they just need a little bit of fuel to like change their direction and make this much more progress or whatever the case is. But nobody talks about how in order to be there in the first place, they had to burn a lot of fuel taking off. And that can be really, really exhausting for a lot of companies just to get to that point. So it's definitely a circumstance where the future looks different than the past.
I think that's a perfect analogy. And if I can touch on SEO for a second too, I think SEO is such an interesting thing in this industry because in the majority of other industries, SEO is the first thing you do. You don't do ads first. You do SEO first. You build a site, you optimize it, you get it going, and then you start running ads. And it's the opposite in this industry. People just jump on ads,
People want to see ads work in order to know if SEO works,
exactly.
which doesn't at all make sense. But that's how it works.
No, it's exactly that. And I think SEO is something that is just so missed in this industry where it's such an opportunity because to your point, it takes 90% of the fuel. You will burn money getting SEO going. And if you're so focused on your ROI, you're never going to get SEO going because SEO does not produce a viable ROI for at least a year, and that's if you're pumping on quite a bit of money into it.
On the topic of SEO, I just want to share a couple like interesting facts that I think let's just go through a mental exercise. So fact number one is more people click on organic results in Google than on paid ads. Number two, this isn't really a fact, but just think. Just count in your head over the past year or whatever the case is, how many real estate gurus, investors whatever the case is, have mentioned how PPC is great. Just think, how many have you heard? And then think the same thing for SEO. And then realize there's more SEO leads out there than there are PPC leads. And how much do you hear about PPC versus SEO? I've asked in the past couple of weeks, I've asked 2 of our clients that have done well with SEO to come on the podcast. Both of them refused. They said, I don't want my competitors to know. Like PPC is the thing that's good enough that everybody wants to talk about it so that like everybody's excited and they want to share the results. SEO is the thing that's so good that nobody wants to talk about it.
Exactly.
Because they're just afraid.
Got to keep the tricks.
They're afraid of losing it. There's a real scarcity mindset there. But it's true. Like how many people love PPC? But for the number of people who are pursuing SEO compared to the opportunity size there and the number of leads, it's a really, really good channel.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to be more patient. You have to kind of have the mindset of I'm going to work harder and I'm going to spend more money and I'm going to do that longer than anybody else does. And if I do all of those things, it's unreasonable that I'm not going to outperform my competition from an SEO standpoint. But nobody's willing to do that. That's what makes it so easy, though, in this industry. It's not.
Exactly.
It makes it because your competition is not that heavy on SEO compared to so many other industries I know where you have to spend so much money to make a dent. And here you can go pretty far if you're willing to have the patience. But the inconsistency just kills. Like that's where we have clients like SEO feels like the thing that is just easy to turn on and off when it's, not really.
Yeah. It's the first thing to go whenever someone's tight on money, for sure.
Yeah. We just had a conversation with a client that had a really tough issue with their acquisitions team where they've like pretty much lost all their acquisitions team. So then they're saying, I want to cut SEO. And like that's a good example of what I consider like not a great way to make a decision. So for PPC, I'd be like, yeah, all about it. Cut PPC. But for SEO, they were just like, well, I don't want to pay for leads that we can't actually manage. But then the question I asked, well, in 2 months, are you ever planning on hiring an acquisitions team? Because the problem is if you don't continue to stay consistent with SEO, and this is where it kills a lot of investors. They take like a 2-month break here because of cash flow, or a 2-month break there because they didn't have their acquisitions team ready to manage leads and stuff like that. But SEO is not about that 2 months. You do that, and then now it's going to take you 4 months to catch up to where you were paying for it. It's like taking a higher interest loan against your future lead flow, and it's just not worth it if you don't have to. that's personally what I've seen screws people up on SEO in this industry. Like, it's not actually that hard, but if you don't just do it consistently for a long time, then it won't produce. But it's a hard thing to do because you haven't seen it work yet.
Yeah.
Right? You have to have faith. You have to have a lot of trust in whoever you're working with or something like that. They're not just blowing smoke and giving you fake numbers. You got to trust that it's actually going to get to where it's trying to go. Have you seen any other problems like that with SEO?
Yeah, no, I think we need to look at SEO more like investing in stock, and I mean, we're all investors, right?
Rentals, right?
It's perfect. Rentals, real estate, stock, whatever it is. And you don't have to become a day trader of SEO,
Yeah.
And so if SEO is one of those things that if you can just constantly be keeping it on and be investing in it, it's a true investment that pays out, really well later on. And I think that's the way we need to look at it. And not to diminish paid ads, because paid ads are kind of our bread and butter. But at the same time, I think SEO needs a lot more attention in this industry. I know some people, especially those two clients, it sounds like, would prefer not to have it become the mainstream thing because they're doing so well. But that's why, like, people do well with it when they do it, because it's not the mainstream thing and it's kind of a blue ocean strategy. So I think that's SEO needs a lot more love, and I my clients can tell you that I love SEO, and I'm always preaching that if things are going well, get some stuff going with your SEO, and don't cut SEO the moment something goes wrong, So I think that's exactly where we need to be, and I think there's a lot of opportunity coming up here in the future with both paid ads and SEO, where the market's crazy. People don't know what their ROI is going to look like at the end of 2023, so they're being really cautious. And every mastermind that I've gone to, they're all the people who are doing well are all preaching, double down. Now's the time to, like, double down. Just do everything you can to go crazy. And I think it's a great time to be doing that, and not focusing so much on your ROI and focus more on, or I guess a better way to put it is not focus on what your ROI is going to be in 6 months and but instead what your ROI could be 2 years from now if you're taking advantage of what's going on now. So
yeah, I mean, the last market crash made a lot of millionaires. I can tell you that
exactly.
much. So yeah, it's really true. I think, and maybe we'll close with this. I think a client that I talked to recently had an awesome perspective on this. Just to put it into like someone else's words, and I'll butcher it, but basically we were looking at his results, and he had like 3 deals this month from PPC, and he had like 1 deal from SEO. All he would talk about was the deal from SEO. And I was like, well, what about these 3 deals from PPC? Like, aren't you excited about those too? And he compared it. He basically said, like, those deals from PPC are good. I view those like wholesale deals, right? I made this much money from this deal, and that was good. That deal from SEO, where I made 20 grand or whatever the case is, I view that as I like netted 20 grand of rental income this month, basically. And just think about it, like whatever revenue you did in your business, if you're doing 300 or 400,000 a month, or wherever you're at, what if instead of that was wholesale deals? What if that was rental income? It's a whole different game, right? Because there's implied equity there. Mm-hmm. And that implied equity has a lot more value than a wholesale deal, a quick buck. I kind of think of that like SEO versus PPC. So that's it for today, for the Collective Clicks podcast. We'll see you next time.